So I'm planting the last batch of carrots for the year. So these are the ones that we'll be eating in early winter. Ironically, I've already got my winter and spring carrots already in. And I'm planting them after cabbages. So they're going a little bit late, but that's kind of the price you pay for having this beautiful crop of red cabbages. And I think there's plenty of time. You know, carrots normally take about 90 days, so they've got all of June, all of July, all of July, all of August, and all of September. It's a pretty sunny spot here. They'll enjoy the extra warmth associated with having a net over them. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that I'll get them. The reason that they'll only be for early winter is because I won't be able to protect them from a hard frost here, and they'll be fairly small carrots, so ideal for sort of salads, yeah, I think it'll work pretty well. And then the next thing is, obviously I want to get this bed replanted in February as well, so I don't want them to be in here for too long. So I'm giving it a good weed, and actually it doesn't need too much of a weed because I've kind of kept on top of it. I'm just going to put a little bit of topsoil over the top here because I find that carrots, they just really like to germinate in a nice sort of sandy topsoil. And away we go. So I'm not going to feed this bed other than the feed that went before, because these were cabbages. They had quite a good feed before I planted them, and I probably will just give them something like a liquid seaweed feed or something like that once they start growing, just to help them, just in case there's any little micronutrient shortages. But other than that, I'm just going to leave them as is. I've already got, as I said, my winter and spring carrots growing, and I'm very happy with the way that they're going. And I've already got my summer carrots and autumn carrots growing as well. So as I said, these are just the winter ones. And I've given them a good water, 2 or 3 watering cans per square metre. And I'm pretty confident now there's water fairly deep down, sort of 6-8 inches down. So there's something for the carrots to go searching for. In this weather, it's perfect for carrots right now, showery. So that's why I'm so keen to get them in. So you do need to keep your carrot seeds damp whilst you're waiting for them to germinate. And then for the first couple of weeks after they've germinated, until they can get their roots down fairly deep. But after that, they're pretty easy to look after, provided we're not in a drought or something like that, and also provided you put a net on them, because we've still got carrot fly around here, and we will have for a long time, until sort of late October, sort of early November, at the earliest time really, when you can stop worrying about carrot fly here. Trying to get this nice and level. Don't worry about little lumps. Carrots don't seem to mind, provided you're not growing for show, in which case you want to take a lot more care. But I'm not growing for show, I'm just growing for eating, so I don't mind slight deformities. Nothing, I'm not so keen on really badly forked carrots or anything like that, but my carrots generally look okay. Okay, so let's get a bit closer. I am growing Eskimo for moles, and partly because Eskimo is a really good variety for winter. They stand very well in the ground, but also because they're pelleted, which makes them really easy to sow. And I'm giving them more space than I normally do. So I like to just do this with a stick and just make a little V. This is the way I do it when I'm doing it with pelleted seeds. If I'm doing it with just raw seeds, naked seeds, then I like to do it in a broad drill, but I find that pelleted seeds work really well like this in a V, because you can space them really evenly. And I'm pretty confident in these seeds. I've got almost 100% germination with these seeds the last time I sowed them, which was only about 6 weeks ago, so I'm pretty confident they'll still be nicely viable. And the reason that I'm giving them more space is because they're not growing in sort of peak of summer. So some of them are going to be, well, they are going to be growing in September and October. So yeah, that's enough of that. Let's get some sowing done. As I say, because they're pelleted, makes it super easy. And I'm going to give them 1.5 inches. And now I normally give them 1 inch, but because they're late in the season, we'll just give them a bit more space so they get a little bit more sun. And I'm also giving them a bit more spacing between rows than I normally do as well. Now you will see gardeners doing all sorts of crazy things to cope with the fact that carrot seeds are really tiny. I really don't subscribe to them, things like wallpaper paste and carrot tape and mixing with sand and all these sorts of things. I think there's basically 2 techniques you need when you're doing carrots, maybe 3. The first one is you just use pelleted seed if the variety you want is available. The second technique is just to sow at twice the density that you want, and then thin them out if your germination isn't quite up to spec, and just roll them with your fingers when you're putting them into the ground, and that's relatively easy. You can't get it perfect density when you do that, but I mean that's what thinning's for. And then the other technique is just to sort of make little holes in the ground at the density that you want, and then just put 2 or 3 seeds in each little hole and cover those over. And that's what a lot of people do when they're growing in containers, for example. So pelleted seed really for me is the best technique if you want to sow your target density and not do any thinning, but obviously that only works if your seeds are good. So I do like to mark my rows. I just use little bits of stick that I find on the path. That's the beauty of having wood chip paths. You've always got plenty of little sticks. And then I just use my hand and just fold the compost or soil in this case over, trying to get a fairly even sort of 1 centimetre coverage, but not worrying too much about it. And because this is a fairly weed-free soil that I'm using here, I'm going to water the whole bed. If you were in the unfortunate situation of planting in a very weedy soil, then you would just water the drill that you'd planted your carrots into, pre-water them, and not water the surrounding soil to minimise weed germination in that soil. But that's quite a tricky thing to do by comparison with just watering the whole bed, so I think it's worth just trying to use a weed-free compost if you can. And I am not going to cover these for a week, just so that if there are any weeds coming up, I can see them and I can deal with them on a day-to-day basis when they're really nice and small. But after a week, which should be before any carrots germinate, I'll get a net on here. Otherwise we'll have carrot fly issues for sure. And by then, the remainder of those red cabbages will have been harvested and the leeks will have been planted. And so I can cover the whole bed. There we go.